Hello, and welcome to this Back from the Brink edition of the Purple Journal podcast. I am your host, Joe Johnson, owner of purplePTSD.com, jubilant Vikings fan, and also owner of VikingsTerritory.com. Here with my biggest competition, who I'm falling further and further behind, I believe, in the prediction battle.
Oh, yeah, you had a bad week today.
It's actually getting to the point where it's more important to me that I win that than the team wins, but that's...
A lot of season left.
Yeah.
A lot of season left.
That's Joe Oberle, who's a senior writer for purplePTSD.com and for the Sports Post.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm good.
What was your prediction for the game again?
Last week?
Yeah.
23-17. And I was sitting next to Sam Ekstrom up in the press box, and he tweeted out the same thing. And then he says, look at this. And Luke Inman, 23-17. All three of us. It was kind of interesting.
We all got the Bucs right.
That's right. Right on the nose. We did not get the Vikings right. They had a nice offensive weekend.
Nobody saw that coming.
Yeah, that's, if I was going to, speaking of protests, if I were to do a protest of my own, I would say that all this uncertainty is throwing off my generally amazing prediction radar, but I'm just bad at it. Either way, Luke's here too.
I exist.
Yay. One more
Arguably.
week. How you doing, man? Luke is a senior writer for Purple PTSD as well, and wrote a great article this week about the record start to Dalvin Cook's career as a Viking.
I'm doing good. I've also started a podcast with Jason from Climbing the Pocket and Eric Eager of PFF.
Yeah, I noticed something about that. I was going to ask you about that, which shows the great relationship we have off the air, but I wasn't sure. Yeah, if you want to just kind of give the elevator pitch on what you guys are doing over there, too.
Yeah, it's just an analytic-based podcast. We're all Vikings fans, so we talk a lot about the Vikings, but it's more about, talking about analysis and in a broader general theory sense. I would love if everybody went and checked it out. I really like the content. We talked. If you're mad about Xavier Rhodes' PFF grades, you should go listen to the first episode. And if you want to know why in the world Case Keenum did well, you should go listen to the second episode.
And where's it hosted?
It's hosted at Climbing the Pocket. And if you are subscribed to the Climbing the Pocket podcast, which you should be, it's fantastic content, you will also get this.
Well, if you know apparently why Case Keenum was so good, you should tell us here then.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to go into it now?
Yeah, let's do it. During the game, my dad kept saying to kind of demystify the situation that Keenum has a history of doing well against the Bucs, and I was planning on reading more into that. But I mean, is that just familiarity with him, or
that's probably just a coincidence? That's just randomness being fun.
It's silly. They're different teams.
That's just fun.
Case against the Bucs, for crying out loud.
It's only 4 games over the course of his whole. It's like whatever. But no, so he is a very high variance quarterback. This is something that Eric explained a lot better probably than I will on that podcast, but I'll do my best. He's a high variance quarterback, right? Which means he'll put up a lot of stinkers, and he'll put up some absolutely stellar games. He actually, over the course of his career, I forget where hang on. There was a great stat that Jason pulled up in a DM conversation between the three of us with. He has 4 games in his career with a passer rating over 120. And that's actually a higher percentage than Sam Bradford has. But he also has a higher percentage of games with passer rating under 60, which is pretty abysmal. So he's kind of like live by the case, die by the case. And that's really good to have as a backup.
How is their, you said percentage, I mean, doesn't the volume for Bradford's a lot higher, right? Of course, he was injured so much, so.
Right. Sam has 3 or 4 times as many games.
Right.
So as a backup, that's kind of what you want as a backup, because if you think of a backup as, if you need your backup for 4 games, you want to go 2-2, which is kind of exactly the situation we're in. If you have somebody like a Scott Tolzien, or like a Matt Castle, you're very likely to not win any of those games, because at their best, they might not be able to produce enough to win, and at their worst, you'll lose, and you maybe won't lose as bad as you will with Case Keenum, but a loss is a loss. So with Case Keenum, he'll have a game where he'll just fall apart and throw 4 interceptions, but that's going to be a loss anyways if you're looking at the other options like Matt Castle. And then sometimes he'll throw together games like this. So basically, Case Keenum just does this sometimes, is the answer.
The term
he just kind of does it.
And what is
out with was variance, which is why Case Keenum is not a regular starter anywhere.
Right. And JR did a great job also on Purple PTSD of explaining what Pat Shurmur was able to do to make it so that Case Keenum could have a good game, with just basically giving him a kill for man versus zone. So you're only asking Case Keenum to read one thing, man versus zone, and that's not a very hard thing to do pre-snap. And then he has one play that's for man and one play that's for zone, and he can check out of the first one and into the second one if he thinks the defense is gonna do that thing. That's a fairly easy assignment for a backup quarterback who's in his first year with the team to accomplish. Mm-hmm. And it also allows Case Keenum to, it allowed a lot of people to get open downfield, and for Case Keenum to YOLO like Case Keenum likes to YOLO.
Yeah, you talked about that last week, man. He broken plays, he throws it up. There was a play in the Tampa game where he tried to throw it out of the end zone, and it was almost an interception that reminded me of that too, where he just kind of threw it off his back foot. But it makes you wonder how good this Vikings offense really is, or if it's more of we played the Saints and the Bucs had a ton of injuries.
Yep. I touched on that in my really awesome preview that I posted today that Joe didn't highlight when he introduced me, so big deal. But that's okay.
Like country music. I'm still dealing with that gigantic.
Some of it I do. Yes. It's. I asked the question: is it sustainable? I still need to see him play a decent defense, one that's not beat up. Tampa's came in limping and then just limped throughout the entire game, losing player after player, and you can YOLO against somebody like that, So, when hearing these numbers that Luke's talking about and the term variance, I don't know that it is sustainable with Case. It's a better offensive line if the line they're going against isn't the best in the league, and we've got both quarterbacks have had a great performance, but they've come against lesser teams. So if they can do it against somebody that, I think we'll find out a little more this weekend. I don't know how great. Detroit's, this is getting ahead, but Detroit's defense is not that great, but it's not bad either. So we'll find a little bit more about how sustainable it is, and I guess that's what I'm waiting to see before I dive all in on Case Keenum and the offense and everything else.
And after the show last week, there was news that Bradford was going to get a second opinion from the fabled Dr. James Andrews, and I know that he didn't. They quote unquote let him rest today for practice. I don't know if there's any updates outside of that.
Keenum,
going to be Keenum again?
I think so. They trotted him out during the interview portion at Winter Park today, and I don't think Sam made it out there. I did not stick around to see Sam hem and haw about not playing, and Keenum really looked like someone who was prepping again, and he just had that attitude about him. And then on that day when you hear him say they gave him a rest, they're going to try to get him ready. They'll say they'll try to get him ready, but I think it'll be Keenum after hearing that.
I think we're looking at week 6 for Sam. Is the Packers game, I think, is where they'll try to get him back, and we'll have to limp through these next couple with Case.
Well, it's good to see that. I guess they don't need to rush him back, but I think, the people shouldn't expect the same performance. But then again,
no.
Diggs and Thielen are number 2 and number 3 in the league in receiving yards for wide receivers right now, and when you have players like that getting open, I guess a backup quarterback should be able to hit them.
Once again,
Diggs and Thielen did a great job of. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, once again, the defenses they played against, but yes, they are.
Yeah.
They are. Go ahead, Luke.
Diggs and Thielen did a great job of erasing inaccuracies from Keenum as well.
Yes.
And I was going to say, with the Tampa defense, there are a lot of defenses we're going up against that aren't very good. You know, we get the Bears twice. The Packers they allowed Andy Dalton to pass all over them and almost lost that game.
Yeah.
You know, the Browns defense isn't exactly what it looked like on paper, and I think they're still a couple years away just with all that youth. You know, the Lions twice. So you're right. I would love to see them, you know, perform against a greater defense, but there are going to be a lot of games where they don't have to, and that's something that maybe it's going to be nice to. That's something that'll be nice to experience. You know, we get this first kind of slate of games, especially leading up to the bye. We get a lot of soft defenses.
You know, and just to jump back real quick, a point you made about erasing some inaccuracies. They did that on opening night against St. Louis for Bradford, two or three themselves. I know that Thielen had a couple that he was stretched to the extent of his catching radius and still made a grab. So.
Oh, the Saints game?
Yeah. So
you said St. Louis, and I got confused for a minute.
Did I? I'm sorry, Saint. Yeah, Saints. I'm sorry.
Why do you got to do it to that? If we have any listeners in St. Louis, I apologize, but I don't think you exist.
Yeah, there were a few throws that it looked like he overthrew him, and Thielen, and he ended up catching him kind of on his tiptoes, but
he's got a huge catching radius. It's amazing, you know.
Yeah.
He's caught so many on the tips. You know, at the top of his radius this year already. It's amazing. I just marvel at him.
During the game, I think I don't know if that was Spielman's brother in the box or not, but he said that if you throw a ball basically within 8 yards of Thielen, he'll catch it no matter what. So it's kind of touching on my.
I
was going to say a 45-yarder was a thing of beauty with one hand straight behind his back for a second. The other hand came up to help out, but he was interfered, and couldn't believe there wasn't a flag on that play.
On that very first big catch?
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
God dang, that's
We'd all be a
heck
lot
of
more
concentration by your receiver to pull that thing in. I mean, a bomb like that, you're getting harassed, you're getting pulled behind you, and you stick one arm out and bring it in. Oh, it's incredible. He's a good player.
And it sort of came out of nowhere starting last year. Obviously, you know, Thielen had his huge year last year, and Diggs was coming off a strong rookie campaign. But are you guys? I guess you wouldn't be surprised having followed the team, but I mean, having such a great duo at wide receiver, it's something we haven't seen for a really long time.
But you know, look, if I can just say one more thing about Thielen, excuse me. Maybe it comes from, you know, how he's been all his life. The story is he went on to MSU Mankato and they gave him a $500 scholarship. So he wasn't exactly greeted with open arms there. So then he comes and he's undrafted for the Vikings. This is a guy who's had to do the work his tail off, become a good route runner, and overcome. I mean, he's not the fastest guy, but he's got good speed. And he's I think it's something to be said about how hard. I mean, a person can have talent, but it depends on how hard you're going to work. Is how well you're going to succeed in the NFL. Maybe just a thought.
Tom Brady.
Yeah, he's
effect.
improved year over year as well.
Pardon?
Actually, it's very similar to Tom Brady's whole. I mean, Tom Brady's done a lot of interviews about how, like, every offseason he works his ass off to improve at one thing that he didn't think he was very good at before. Like, for a while, he didn't have a good deep ball, and he worked to improve it. Now he has a good deep ball. And Adam Thielen, I think, has followed a similar path, and it's really, really fun to watch.
It is. For a guy to work his tail off and get rewarded for it. You know, he'll right now, I don't think he has far to go to be the top player to ever come out of that college in the NFL. There have been others, I think 4 others, but 3 or 4 others. But right now, he's on a nice trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, and it's like I said, I've always been a big wide receiver guy. So watching this, it reminds me of sort of the Moss, Chris Carter days, the good old days. And it's surprising, I think, just because a lot of people didn't expect it. I don't think not so much the play of Diggs and Thielen, but more so the play calling of Shermer, which is something we've talked about during the offseason. 2, And
Luke.
yeah, I wanted to see.
It's been night and day.
Yeah, what's going on, man? I mean, is it? Well, I'll let you kind of.
I mean,
a little bit more.
so this last game, Pat Shurmur did a brilliant job adjusting for having your backup quarterback in there, and I love that. I'm worried that this looks a lot like 2016 in the way of, we had a situation and we adapted well to it, and then once we feel like we don't have to adapt, we're going to go set into our old, really ineffective ways. And I don't want them to do that, and I'm really worried that, we're going to see them regress because they're going to just kind of like revert back to we can script every play now and then not have to adjust as much, and because we've got our guy and he's comfortable now and we can do these weird West Coast inefficient things. I really hope that they learn from. Well, yeah, they coaches often overscript plays and they often get a little bit stuck in concepts of things like, running on second and long. This is another thing we talked about on the podcast with Eric and Jason. But just, things like running on second and long, things that are maybe situationally suboptimal, but it's what we do. And I hope that, the winds of change have kind of knocked Pat Shurmur into a really, really good strategy. He's been forced to adapt to things, and it's been kind of forcing him to make proper decisions. And I hope that he can understand that, I'm making the right decision, and this made me make the right decision, but it's the right decision, so I'm going to keep making it.
I don't know enough about or have followed him as closely as you may have as far as his Shurmur's history, but of the past two offensive coordinators the Vikings had, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Shurmur's the more flexible and the more adjustable than Turner was, because I think that's why he was shown the door, because he didn't want to adjust and didn't want to get out of his way of doing things. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that he will keep adjusting. I hope he does.
It reminds me of that quote in regards to Norv from Titanic, the movie. 30 years of experience working against him.
Yep. I think that happens a lot with NFL coaches.
That's a great quote. I've not heard that one.
A lot of coaches learned and cut their teeth in the 70s and 80s, and they're trying to play 70s and 80s football, and a lot of defensive coordinators are light years ahead of them.
Right.
And we did want to touch on, before we get into the game a little bit more in depth, because we have a lot to talk about there, we'd be remiss if we didn't touch on the huge story that's been going around all week, which is the protests and President, quote-unquote, Trump's dumping gasoline on that fire over the weekend in a series of tweets. And I'm sure that a lot of people listening have kind of had their fill of that, but it's a really big story, and it's probably one of the bigger. And Joe, you can touch on this too, but I don't know if this has ever happened to the NFL before, just in general, or had this level of controversy.
Well, they're usually lockstep with the president, and the country, and because
that's their bread and butter.
Exactly. I've kind of had my fill of it. I touched on it at the end of my game wrap story last week, but I have since then heard several people say that they might stop watching football, and I just really scratch my head at that. And I just say, if you look at it from a free speech perspective, the guy had a platform, he used it. He's now paying for using that platform. He doesn't have a job in the NFL, which he definitely should. He is no different in using his platform to say what he thinks about something than the president of the United States, who has an even bigger platform. And if you want to, in my eyes, the thing was dying down a little bit. I mean, it wasn't as big a deal until Trump came out and threw fire, or threw gas all over it, and it inflamed it again. And I feel it was for his reasons there to distract from other things. But beside the point, I mean, Trump should be the protector of free speech in chief, and in fact, he's trying to silence somebody, and it just for me, I don't have to think any more than that, and to just really be disappointed in what the guy said. So.
And I feel like we touched on this last week, and it's hard for me to not sort of expound my personal views in things like that, just because that's how I write about football in the first place. But I I went to school for political science. It's kind of my, outside of football, it's like my number one interest. And I listen to a lot of like right-wing talk radio just because I find it interesting for some reason. I'm not necessarily a right-wing person, but I find it intellectually stimulating as opposed to listening to country music like some of us do in our golden years. But
goodness, wow.
My thing with Kaepernick, and it's been the same thing with the protests at Berkeley, which I don't agree with either. Freedom of speech is fine when you agree with everything, but you test how much you believe in freedom of speech when someone's saying something you don't agree with, and I feel like people on both sides of the aisle are doing a pretty poor job of that.
I agree with that.
I wouldn't say I'm surprised, but to see the number of people that use the insult snowflake on Twitter like once or twice a week, burning their jerseys and boycotting Jennifer Lawrence movies, it's the same thing that they're mad that the left does, but it's just they think it's different because it's patriotic, and it's really no different. I mean, we touched on this last week, and obviously the military does have a strong association with the flag, but the national anthem isn't the military anthem, and that's not even really what they're protesting. So it's just kind of it's turned into this huge thing that it wasn't meant to be, and that's that's a political tool. I mean, framing of issues and making sure that things get confused. So someone you don't agree with, more people will disagree with them based on false pretenses. And I feel like, maybe Kaepernick hasn't done a good enough job of explaining, or the guys in general, what their point of view is. But it's turned into this huge. I mean, when the president's calling an NFL player a son of a bitch, like, it's just, what is going on, man?
Watches TV a lot, and if he sees something on TV that he doesn't like, he's got to open his Twitter finger.
It's just, I want to watch football and enjoy football, and I'm already, this is a super hyper-personal and narcissistic take, but I'm already worried about, like, the Hernandez news about how bad his CTE was, and he was only 27 years old, and the future of the game in general. And then when you have, the part of the fan base basically turning its back on the league, I mean, these are just kind of could be looked back at the death knell of the game, at least as we know it now, and that's just no fun for anybody. So let the guys do what they want to do. I mean,
Luke,
they're not killing anybody.
Yeah, Arif Hassan did a great, unbelievable piece at Zone Coverage about it's just called "Sticking to Sports." And the intrinsic relationship between sports and politics, because, they're both in different ways manifestations of culture and manifestations of how a society decides to organize itself. So I think the idea that, keep your politics out of my sports, keep your protests out of my sports, I think is just an erroneous thought. And I think it doesn't matter. He's protesting police brutality and racial biases within police brutality. There's no two ways about that. He's not protesting the military. He's not protesting the flag. There was one thing I saw on Twitter that Huh?
And he's not burning.
Yeah, he's on
the flag. It's a peaceful protest.
Yeah, he's not burning. There was a great thing I saw on Twitter. Somebody asked their kid about, what they thought about Colin Kaepernick kneeling during or these football players kneeling during the anthem. And the kid, in a way that is so poignant in only a way a child can be, talked about, when somebody gets injured, players will kneel next to him and hope he gets better. Oh. And they just think that the country is broken and they hope that it gets better. And I think that's so, it's so great that, a kid can just nail it like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way we have to talk about it. People think the country is broken and it needs to get better. And honestly, if you don't think the country is broken right now, you need to open your eyes. And start a productive dialogue. Listening is a huge part of that. Listening to people who say, hey, no, this is about, police brutality, instead of saying, no, you're incorrect, and I hate you, and you just hate America. Listen to what they have to say. And hopefully, if there are people who listen to this podcast who, think that they're all just, they've turned off. Yeah. If they think that these people are all just, being attention whores, or if they think these people are just, trying to be edgy, or if they think that these players are disrespecting the nation of America, they need to rethink what their idea of American symbolism is, and they need to rethink like what America stands for, because America does not stand for blind loyalty. It stands for, if anything, positive discourse. And,
there you go.
The ability to argue about something and for the ability for the citizens to decide how they want to organize themselves. That's what democracy is.
Even if that includes listening to country music, Joe.
No, see, there's a line though. Country music is on the other side of that line.
I see this since you're taking two shots at it. I did see a tweet by Charlie Daniels. This is where this country music thing came from. He said, I would ordinarily be watching Thursday Night Football, but for some reason I'm not. And some guy retweets it and says, it's Wednesday, jackass.
I'll end with one more thing. If you listen to this podcast and the things that I said bother you or you want to talk to me about it, my Twitter handle is @SpokenFlow22, and I would love to chat with you about it.
Yay.
Talk to anybody.
It's that's what it is. It's just to kind of put this to bed, but the saddest thing about the internet to me is that it's the greatest tool in the history of civilization for knowledge, and people have used it just to kind of reiterate their own beliefs. And I think people on both sides of the aisle are stuck in these bubbles where they don't hear contrary information very often, and so when they do, they lash out at it. And it's just, we're so far apart from solving any problems because everything's so far apart. So
it's kind of a mirror of the society, though. I mean, they're just being who they are. I think if you met them on the street, but yeah, I agree. It could be put to such better use. But hey, you got to be able to. Good place to have a discussion. So it's fine with me.
And I guess that's what the protests are at least successful in that way. At least some people are talking about it.
Absolutely. And Trump helped him.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if Kaepernick got a job now based on the reaction from last Sunday. And that was kind of...
Or the bad play of Joe Flacco.
Oh.
There you go.
Who we'll be seeing in a few weeks, thank God. But anyway, back to the team and the amazing game that was Sunday. Luke, you wrote a piece about Dalvin Cook and what the success rate and what it means.
Yes.
And I know we touched on this, I think, last week or the week before in regards to Adrian Peterson and his success rate being relatively low. And that's something the Vikings fans, I guess, were kind of used to, the boomer bust sort of Case Keenum sort of approach that Adrian Peterson had. But is that what you found when you were looking at what Cook has been doing, or has he been more consistent?
I was looking more at the impact that success rate was having on the rest of the offense, Dalvin Cook included. Like, if the play was successful, how much better does the offense get? And the answer is a lot. With Dalvin specifically, I kind of wish he was a little better on first down. I also understand that most of the failed first down runs are the fault of the blocking, and Dalvin Cook has actually created success where there wasn't. And his play as a person has been phenomenal to achieve success rate, but the run blocking hasn't been quite good enough for us to have like an above averagely successful running offense. I don't think. I also was just looking at first down, so he's been very good when we're ahead of the chains. Dalvin Cook is really good at keeping us ahead of the chains, which is unbelievably valuable. To be able to turn 2nd and 6s into 3rd and 2s is incredibly valuable. And the difference in the offense, I think it's something like 70 points of passer rating, which is insanity. It goes from an MVP, level of performance to Christian Hackenberg. Like, it's just, the range is huge.
Nope.
Yeah,
I love good lulls in conversation.
No, yeah, I couldn't tell if my stupid headset went out. So when you look at the running game as a whole, I know that he's averaging the graphic they showed during the game was that he's ahead of Adrian Peterson basically through the first 3 games, and I think he's averaging like 4.7 yards a carry. Is it, when you look at the success of the running game, is it more complicated than that, really?
We'll need to put out a 300-yard game sometime soon to keep on Adrian Peterson's pace.
Yeah.
I just think Dalvin gets so much of his own, too. I mean, he's not getting huge holes. All he needs, and Zimmer was kind of explaining this the other day, all he needs is a crease, and he will, get through there and make something out of it. And then he's strong enough to drag some tacklers with him in the second level. And he's done a lot of his work up the middle in tough yards, and he just keeps banging. It's nice that he's that young, because we see the other end of it where Peterson has slowed down and it's just not as powerful anymore. So it's nice to see this, and hopefully someday they start opening some of the holes that Peterson used to get. Then you'll see those big runs.
And there was a point during the game on Sunday where the announcers were saying or questioning why the Vikings were throwing the ball so much with the lead that they had. I think it was after the Tampa touchdown, and they were saying that there was still a lot of time left in the third quarter, and that because of the fact that the Vikings weren't running the ball, that we weren't eating up a lot of clock. Was that something that was by game design, or why don't you think they, in that instance, or I don't know if that extrapolates like into the other games, but why aren't they riding him towards the end of the game during big leads to pick up those, AP games with 300 yards? I just don't know. I watched the game twice, and I just didn't know if they just wanted Keenum to keep the hot hand going, or what was, or if they wanted his confidence to extend. Gives you.
I mean, their secondary was beaten up. Grimes was out, and I think they lost one or two others in the back end as the game went on. So maybe that was take where you're gonna find your success and go from there.
Yeah, it's an obvious running situation. So I guess the kind of default answer is, well, it's an obvious running situation, so we wanted to make sure we didn't do that. But also the defense was gassed, and they were down Brent Grimes, and Vernon Hargreaves was either out of the game or playing hurt. I forget if he had left the game at that point. So they're down two cornerbacks, and Gerald McCoy was playing hurt, Levante David was playing hurt, Quan Alexander was out. So it was definitely a depleted unit that you can just kind of not let off the gas. I think on the other side of this, we often will criticize offenses for letting teams come back because they just ran the ball 3 times in obvious running situations and punted, and they kept giving the other team the ball back to try to stage a comeback. So I don't mind the idea of going for passing. Obviously, it looks worse when it doesn't work, but when it does work, then you keep the gas on, you keep scoring points, and that's how you make games look ugly.
I was going to just make the similar point that how many times have we just crabbed at the TV when in those situations you're 3 and out, because they're trying to eat the clock, and then you go back into the locker room, and that's what he says. Coach says his reasoning behind it, and you just want to pull your hair out because they don't get the first down, the other team comes back, and you lose the game. So yeah, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, I think.
Yeah, it's important to distinguish between bad play calls and play failures are not necessarily because the play call was bad. Often it is. It's sometimes because the play call was bad and your play failed because you called a bad play. But play failures do not equate to bad play calls. Every play looks bad when it fails.
Well, speaking of failed plays, Luke had a good prediction. It was strange in watching the game. My dad said, "Hey, I think Luke from your show was right this week," after the third interception, maybe, by Jameis Winston.
He really said that in a shocked voice, didn't he?
Yeah, big time. Yeah. That guy's an idiot.
I definitely so my prediction, I did change it about 2 hours before the game, and you can go look at the Purple PTSD Twitter and look at the timestamp for proof. But I decided to try to make it a little bit more bold because I think I said it was over under 1.5 Jameis Winston turnovers.
Yeah.
I went right before the game and said I'm taking the over and a Vikings loss. So I only got half of my prediction right after I made it a little bolder.
You thought he'd go over 2.5 and the Vikings would still lose?
I was really convinced some weird crap was going to happen and Case Keenum was going to fall apart. Yeah.
Yikes.
I was on the way home. I said, "Hey, Luke nailed it." So I guess I didn't see your tweet, but.
So were you? When we talk about the defense, it always kind of goes back to the same point, and that's Trey Waynes. And I know during last week's show we talked about maybe Waynes would ride the pine a little bit, and Brock would come in. I know he got burned on a touchdown where the Spielman was kind of ripping him for not getting his head around or not being able to locate the ball was the issue there. But
he was on him,
which has always been really a problem.
Yeah.
He was right on him, but he just had he didn't know where the ball was, and by the time he looked, it was in the receiver's hand. So he ended up looking really bad.
Did Wayne?
Ian Wharton, who's an NFL Film Study on Twitter, who you should definitely follow, does a lot of defensive back stuff, and he actually said that aside from that play, Tremaine Brock had a better game than I think. I think we just all noticed the one play, but in limited snaps, he played well otherwise. But that whole locating the ball has always been a problem for him, and it's always been the thing kind of stopping him from ascending to the upper echelons of cornerback.
Really?
Play.
Wow. Well, we saw it in spades that day then.
Yeah, you could tell he turned his head at like the complete wrong moment to where he just didn't see it at all.
Yeah. Yep.
But Wayne's had the pick that was just a bad throw. I think basically the consensus from the announcers was that when you have Deshaun Jackson, just throw it to where only he can catch it because he's so fast. He underthrew him. But it was a good play by Wayne's. I was happy to see it. I feel bad for the guy. The team celebrated with him a little bit.
Wayne's was also in good enough position to make it a more difficult throw for Jameis Winston.
Yeah,
with worse coverage, that throw would have been a touchdown. He made it a tighter throwing window. Yeah, he made it a tight and difficult throwing window, and that's part of coverage, and that's part of why the interception was enabled, and then just being able to make the play on the ball. It wasn't a perfect throw, and obviously you would like if it were a good throw and he intercepted it, but credit where it's due. It was an overall a positive play.
And I don't know if
it wasn't a gift like the Sendejo one.
He didn't get a personal foul on that I think there was a taunting call after that interception, but I think that's because Rhodes and Evans.
That was on Rhodes.
Rhodes and Evans were beating the crap out of each other, which I think we talked about this last week too, and we'd rather kind of see a game where two Titans can kind of go at one another, wide receiver and a corner. Granted,
that was fun.
If they're punching each other, I guess you got to call it, but it's kind of a throwback to old school football. I like watching that kind of football. So
I don't know what it is about Xavier Rhodes that makes high profile wide receivers want to take shots at sideline equipment, but he just has that effect on people.
Well, he's good, man. Any other thoughts on how the defense played outside of the turnovers?
A couple sacks by Everson Griffin, right?
Yeah, he's a beast.
That was nice. I heard some people talking this week, because it was in my mind at some point to mention where's their Danielle Hunter been, because we of last year 12.5 sacks, and we all thought he was going to have this breakout year, and it was really interesting. I believe it was the guy from 1500 ESPN, Matt Collier, was saying that he's really playing team defense when it comes to setting up, a lot, doing his job to keep the quarterback in the pocket and forcing him over towards Everson, and he's getting the sack so far. And I thought that was something that I got to pay attention to, because I was just kind of wondering. We haven't really heard his name called a lot so far this year, but he's doing what he's supposed to do.
Yeah, one of the sacks that Griffin had, he was right there too. The one where he spun Winston to the ground, I think. He was about a split second behind him on that, but yeah, the defense, Linval Joseph was blowing up the line, it seemed like, for early in the game especially, which was...
Joseph eats always. He's unstoppable.
Just don't get him on a moped. Yeah, and I mean, we touched on this earlier, but do you guys, especially Luke being a analytical guy and this being such a small sample size, do you really think that the play... Obviously, I don't think we're going to end the season with Diggs and Thielen at 1,500 yards each or anything, but you never know. I guess the question is, do you think that this offense is as good as we've seen, or... I guess the best way to put it is I wrote an article saying that so far the Vikings are showing that their offense is one of the best in the NFC, and the reasoning there was that there's just so many weapons out there. I mean, Jarius Wright got a touchdown. He always comes through when they call his number. Kyle Rudolph seems to be...
Kyle Rudolph. I mean, the guy has almost been as hard to find as...
Are they trying to take him out of the game? Is that the thing? I know that was the game
plan. No, Thielen and Diggs
Saints.
are just always more open.
Yeah.
Okay.
Although, he was the safety blanket last year, and because he's such a big target. And, yeah, I think Luke's right. Those other guys are breaking open. And I think they spent a lot of time, well, at least they did, working with Bradford in the offseason. And so, I don't know. I fully expect Vikings will need Kyle Rudolph as things go on. But he's been awfully silent, too. It's kind of interesting.
I said I was writing about Treadwell hasn't done a lot, but this is the same reasoning. When you're number 1 and number 2 receiver, or second, third in the league in receiving yards, it's kind of hard to argue about a third receiver. But that made me think a little bit more about Michael Floyd coming back after next week and what that'll mean for the offense. And he's
God, I forgot about him.
It's a good problem. Not to say it's even a problem, but the fact that we're not even really talking about him is a good thing. I know that it seems, and we've talked about this on the show ad nauseum, but we're not the greatest team at yards after the catch, and I think that might be a little bit more of Floyd's forte. But you have to think that once Floyd comes back, this could be even more of a scary
That's not his thing
offense.
at all. He's a deep shot guy. Floyd's a deep shot guy. I think your yak generators are going to have to be either the guys Coley, who's been kind of on and off the active list, or turning to Jarius Wright. But I don't think you need yak guys when you're passing it 25 yards down the field,
Definitely. It just seems like our big plays aren't for touchdowns, they're for chunk yardage, and when Floyd gets open, he seems to score more touchdowns. You know what I mean? Like, Thielen's had X amount of grabs over 25 yards, but he hasn't scored a touchdown because he's still covered. He's just really good at catching the ball.
Yeah, well, they're all contested catches, and a lot of that has to do with accuracy from Case Keenum, too.
All right, well, then I got nothing. No, I'm just excited about the offense. I mean, who saw that coming? It's an exciting time to be alive.
Yeah, I haven't done film review on Treadwell either, but a number of people who have done like all 22 film and just watched him have said like he's been getting separation against the Saints was not a fluke. He's been getting separation in other contexts as well, and it just happened to be, a play where Thielen was the first read and also got open, and I think that keeps happening to him. But a lot of people have done film review and have said positive things about his ability to get separation.
So he'll be there when we need him, basically. Hopefully.
And when someone pulls a hammy or whatever.
And so we're facing the Lions at home on Sunday, which will be huge. The Lions technically should be undefeated. I think that game was kind of a travesty the way that ended. If you guys
they shouldn't have been in it in the first place.
In the game,
there were so many. I watched that game after the fact, just looking for like how it transpired. The tide of the game was turned by not one but two tipped interceptions. The first one, the Darius Slay pick six, was earned, but the other two did not feel earned. They felt about as earned as the Harrison Smith one, where it was like, oh, you made the catch contested and it popped up, and that's great. But that, 9 times out of 10, that one just goes flying to the ground and it's an incomplete pass. There were also Matt Stafford threw a few dropped interceptions, and in every line, I don't remember. I don't think I watched the week. Oh no, I did. It was Monday night. Every Lions game that they've played, they have felt like they're on the cusp of a collapse. They really feel 2016 Vikings in the fact that they're just on, like, things are just going to come crashing down to earth because they've gotten a lot of breaks. And the end of the game was the right call anyways.
Luke, I watched the last. It was on the TV in the press box, and I was watching that because I was putting in something about the Vikings playing next week, playing Detroit, and I watched that play. I thought it was a touchdown, and so I wrote that. They were 3-0. And I got in the elevator and went down, and I posted it, went downstairs, and on the elevator, some guy's talking on the way down saying, yeah, did you see how they took that thing away from the Lions? Like, what? On the elevator, scramble, sit down at the table and, rewrite that last sentence. But that whole last drive, there were so many penalties and so many strange things going on. It was incredible. But
I think that drive was enabled by a pass interference on the Falcons, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Otherwise it wouldn't have even been a thing. So.
Yeah, it felt like maybe, I don't remember, right, but there was a lot of drive extending penalties at the end of that game. Right. That kind of kept
Matt Stafford has been playing very well. And he'll probably, he'll get his, and he'll be able to to likely produce even against this defense. You know, he's been playing well. Golden Tate's been playing well. You know, they've got Kenny Golladay now, who's an additional option. Even Eric Ebron has been playing above what we usually expect from him.
So they got a running game. They got like Amir Abdullah back, and they got Theo Riddick back. I mean, between them, Abdullah missed 14 games last year, and Riddick missed 6. And we were talking to Jim Caldwell today, and he was just saying how great it is to have both of those guys back. That not only increases their helps their running game, but I mean they're both good pass catchers out of the backfield, and that's just the kind of thing that Stafford likes to do, you know, run around and find somebody open. So it's you know, I think it'll be a tough game. I really do, and I don't want to preview it and give Joe any hints here, but they swept the Vikings last year, so there's a score to settle here, and they're on a roll. They probably feel like they should be 3-0, so they're probably still coming in with some confidence, you know. So I think it will be a tough battle for the Vikings.
They're feeling a big Anthony Barr game.
I was going to ask about him when we were talking about the defense, and he's been sort of invisible out there, at least from watching just the game on TV. And I was wondering whether or not that was something we should just get used to, or if he's still injured, or if that's what we should get used to as well with Barr. But
he's been playing well. You know, the fact that he hasn't showed up on the broadcast isn't a very good indicator, good or bad. I'm looking up right now how often he's been targeted, because I don't think he's been targeted much. The only one I can remember is one where he got matched up on Antonio Brown, which, you know, duh. He's been unbelievable at limiting outside swing passes and outside runs, which is an incredibly important skill. And I think this defense is very good at limiting, like, east-west kind of quick stuff. You know, their run defense in general has been phenomenal. So I'm actually really excited to see the matchup of, like, Linval Joseph v. Amir Abdullah in that running game.
What has been the difference there in the run game?
Linval's playing out of his skull. Barr's been better. And we've actually had better production from the 3-tech position. You know, Tom Johnson and Shamar Stephen have both been pretty good.
So what are you thinking are going to be the keys to this first division game?
Wait, sorry, I just found the stat. Anthony Barr currently is the 7th least often targeted linebacker, which is a very good thing.
Ooh.
Who is Anthony Barr?
Anthony Barr, yeah, he's not getting targeted a lot. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Keys, Joe, I gotta figure. What was I gonna say? You know, I want to see. I want to see the line have another decent game, and I want to see some consistency out of the quarterback position, not the up and down. Like Luke was saying earlier, how that the variance is a trademark of Case Keenum's game, but we got to see him come out and play another good game, you know, and the defense will have to get after Stafford, because he, in those times they beat Vikings last season, he was very, very mobile and on the run, and even, you know, he reminds me a little bit of Rodgers, how he can get out of the pocket and just make things with his feet. And in fact, that's what Caldwell mentioned today, how talking about how, I guess Zimmer mentioned how well he's playing, because he's a mobile quarterback, and that's given this team fits in the past, so they got to contain him.
Yeah, I seem to remember both those, at least one of those games. One of them was an overtime game last year, wasn't it? I feel like we kind of got, not that we got robbed, but that they were really close games that could have gone either way last season, even during the midst of our disastrous second half of the
Thanksgiving
season.
The Thanksgiving game last year was probably the worst offensive game of the year. I think they had an average depth of target in that game of under 4 yards, which is just inexcusable. You know, that doesn't even make sense. Like, that's beyond even, like, defining it as an outlier, and I hope that doesn't happen again. But yeah, and then the home game was the one where they made like a 59-yarder or something to go into overtime, and it was Zimmer took the timeout, and that was all controversial. I think this one is going to come down to tackling in a big way. Golden Tate is a tough person to tackle, but our linebackers thus far have been very, very good at tackling efficiency. And so have our cornerbacks. I saw a PFF stat that Trey Waynes is actually the best run-stopping corner in the league right now, according to Run Stop, which is a good measure. That doesn't account, that doesn't quite make up for getting beaten in the pass a bunch, but it is definitely worth something. And Terrence Newman is always a good tackler. They're all good yak preventers. So our defense matches up really well. I guess that their defense has, given up a lot. So I hope that, I hope that our offense can sustain itself. But, Case Keenum's the kind of guy that can bomb a game by himself, and we need that to not happen.
It felt like a lot of the credit that the television set was giving to Keenum was that he was stepping into his throws and finding lanes that he didn't find against Pittsburgh because he's kind of a smaller guy. When he runs, he reminds me of Jeff Garcia a little bit. Like, he doesn't have a neck, and he's just running all over the place with his arms out. Like, he looks, just looked a lot like the OG, Jeff Garcia, one of the OGs. And the timing with him and the receivers was better. Granted, we've touched on that Thielen and Diggs did a good job of making inaccurate throws catchable, but against Pittsburgh and in training camp too, it just seemed like he had horrible timing with the receivers, and that was kind of my biggest worry with him moving forward, was if he can't figure it out, how is he going to be able to? So it feels to me like, I don't know, and there's obviously a lot of data to prove this wrong, but I hope he doesn't lose that in the course of a week, that he can build off of it, but there's a reason he's a backup quarterback too. So
he also mentioned
it only takes
when talking to people that he's never had a team like this around him. So that's I don't know.
That's true.
It's neither here nor there, but for him to recognize that, maybe that helps him build his confidence, and maybe he's going to, play off that and have a better game because he's surrounded by a better team. So we'll see. I
think we'll see how good this offense is, or at least a better representation. Not that I'm going on a limb by saying that, but these receivers are really good, and they're good because they're technically sound and they run great routes and they do everything the right way. So maybe they are good enough to elevate a quarterback. Maybe that's some of what we got from Bradford. That's kind of been creeping in my mind. Maybe Bradford isn't this, late bloomer that I've tried to claim that he is, and the more technically sound quarterback out of the Bridgewater-Bradford debate, but maybe it's just that we have a lot of good players on this offense. And
I think that's something that's always true. I mean, better players to play with is going to make you better. I think Bradford is a really decent quarterback, though, and I think there's some of that going both ways. But it helps, with younger quarterbacks to be able to learn to know where the receivers are going to be. And if you got someone like Thielen, who's always going to run great routes, and the same with Diggs, they're going to be there when they're going to be there, and you got the timing down. You're going to complete more passes, I would think.
This is probably the toughest matchup for Stephon Diggs so far. In the mixture of Darius Slay and the other Diggs, because so far he's gone up against Joe Hayden, who seems to be washed. He's gone up against the bad Saints corners and a broken shell of Vernon Hargreaves with no Brent Grimes in the Bucs. So the Lions have two very good cornerbacks, so it'll be fun to that is a matchup that I'm really excited to watch. Diggs and Thielen versus those two guys, and to see if they can create separation. If they can't, this might be the time you see the team start to use Laquan Treadwell a little more.
Ooh.
Yeah, he's got to catch a few passes before what's his face is eligible to play again.
Yeah,
Michael Floyd.
There you go. So, I think we should probably get into our predictions. Let's see.
The audience is debating, Joe.
I know. I think I've gone first the last couple weeks, which has been my downfall.
No, that's not true. You haven't gone first yet.
Oh, well, that's why.
There you go.
God, this is so. Division games are hard. Not knowing what Keenum's gonna do is difficult, but it's a home game. I don't feel like it's pretty ridiculous to say it's a must-win game, but this still is a very competitive division, and we obviously want to get a win against the Lions. I think the team's going to come out on fire. Keenum's going to be confident, which could be a bad thing, throwing the ball over the field. I would say I think the Vikings are going to win, but it's going to be like 20-17 Vikings. It's not going to be anything ridiculous.
Well,
2 touchdowns by Dalvin Cook, though. I see that.
Nice. Is he going to hang on to it this time?
Ooh.
My prediction's online already, so I guess technically I did go first here. But,
Yay. Cheating.
Yeah. I got, I think it's going to be, the ball's going to be thrown around in this game, and there's going to be some points. It's kind of like the last ones, and I liked what I saw last week, and the Vikings are tough at home. I think they're going to score some points, so I'm saying 27, what did I say, 27-23 Minnesota.
Close one.
These games always get weird.
Yeah.
These Vikings-Lions games are always weird.
I instantly regret my decision.
This is not going to be a performance. I like this game. I don't think we can expect to see anything like any of the 3 games we see. I don't think we can expect a performance like the Saints or Bucs. I also don't think we can expect something like the Steelers game. It's going to be weird. I am going to go with a Vikings win. I think this Lions team is a mirage. I don't believe in the wins that they've acquired. I don't believe in how close they were to beating the Falcons. I think the Falcons were clearly a better team play in and play out all up and down the field in that game. I think the Vikings are flawed. Case Keenum is flawed, and it'll be hard to win without a backup quarterback. But you just kind of hope that he can steal one of these next 2 games against the Lions and Bears. If you can get out of this patch of no Sam Bradford 2-2, I think you're happy with that. As for my bold prediction, I'm going to get weird because it's a weird game. I'm going to say that Vikings defensive backs combine for more touchdowns than Marvin Jones and Kenny Golladay. I think we're going to get some Vikings defensive touchdowns.
Wow.
We're just going to get Matt Stafford's going to get aggressive, and he's been aggressive, and I think the Vikings are due.
When you say that the team's kind of a mirage, the Lions are, what do you attribute that to? I mean, I obviously haven't really seen a lot of their games, but is it their offense is overperforming, or is there just been lucky breaks, or some combination?
A lot of drop picks, a lot of kind of circumstances that are not sustainable. Games that were close because of a pick 6. I think we learned a really valuable lesson about sustainability in 2016, and I think the Lions are going down that same path. They just can't keep winning close games. Like we saw in the Falcons, crap just happens. Sometimes you run a good rub route and you land an inch short of the line. That's how close games go, and they aren't necessarily a reflection of quality. So, when you're they overperformed in 2016 in a huge way in close games, and that's just bound to regress. And I don't think they've really shown me anything to show that they're a different team. The defense is still suspect, and Matt Stafford's aggression is going to get
So if you were to
come back to bite him eventually.
If you were to pick a score, Luke, what would it be?
Well, I don't know. It'll be something weird like 29-22 or something crazy dumb like that.
29-19?
Some weird crap like that.
Only the 3rd game in NFL history with a 29-19 score.
Was it?
That's,
oh, wow.
I heard that
the
on the
Saints
radio.
game?
Yeah. It's only
my dad's in a 29 pool where you just pick a team, and if they score exactly 29 points, you win the pool. And
really?
Then he did that in the first. Yeah, it's just some weird gambling thing. In the first game, the Vikings were the team that scored 29, and of course it's in Minnesota, so a bunch of guys picked the Vikings and split the huge pot like in the first week.
Because I used to be in a 31 pool, which is more standard, 4 touchdowns and a field goal. But a 29 pool, I've never heard of.
Yeah, you got to get a weird team.
Does the money
teams
accrue over the weeks that it doesn't happen?
I have no idea. I think he might have explained this to me, and I didn't listen.
Yeah, gambling
So sorry, Dad.
Learning all sorts of stuff this week. Luke's a horrible son. Joe likes country music. Well, despite my demeanor, I'm pretty excited. I think it was a fun game. If you've learned anything from listening to the show, it's that we have to savor these small victories. So it was fun. It was cool for Case Keenum, who I think kept the game ball afterwards, which is just the most adorable thing to me.
You get
Zimmer doesn't usually give them out.
I think he just took it and left the stadium.
No, he gave it to him. He actually said, he goes, I don't do this very often, but he threw it to Case Keenum.
Yeah, the locker room speech is really fun.
Yeah.
I didn't see it. Either way, the Vikes are on the right track. Bradford's coming back. Michael Floyd's going to be here a week from next week or the week after next week. So things are trending up. That's good. That's good for the show. As we learned last year, after the team fell apart, so do the clicks, and I don't really blame anybody who doesn't read about the team when they're losing, because I clearly don't. I don't even watch the games when they are winning, so who am I to point the dirty end of the stick? But wanted to thank everyone for listening to this week's show. Follow us on Facebook at purplePTSD and Vikings Territory, Twitter, purplePTSD and Viking Territory. And Luke, if you wanted to shout out your podcast one more time.
Yeah, it's Pocket Protectors on climbingthepocket.com.
That's the best. I didn't
you can find
hear
it.
that. That's the best name ever.
Yeah, and the tagline is straight math, homie. Yes, do check that out on Climbing the Pocket. It is good content, especially if you have weird questions about Pro Football Focus. Eric opens up a lot and explains a lot about kind of the weird quirks that Pro Football Focus grades have, and then we just talk about some other statistical things. We griped a lot about running on second down, which is bad, and coaches should be better. Go listen to it.
Do it.
And send me your political opinions.
Yeah, send them all to Luke, especially if you're one of my cousins, please.
I think I'll do that.
Go. Let's duke it out.
All right, well, thanks for listening, and we'll be back next Thursday morning. Skol.